Let's talk about this. This is an art tool that is either unknown or underutilized by many beginning artists. Those who don't know about it might have problems like this, where the values of something blur together into this muddy mess, where colors aren't differentiated and look gray, or everything is rendered to the same smoothness despite difference in material. If a beginner artist does know about this, you tend to only hear it in value, specifically high key, middle, low key, etc., making certain spots of the image the brightest to bring your eye there. But there's more to contrast, so I want to talk about the broader definition of it and then what you can use it for. I'll also be talking about it in terms of value, but that'll be towards the end of the video. In the simplest way possible, contrast equals difference. How much difference there is between two things measures how high or low the contrast is. Things like smooth versus fuzzy, hard versus soft, red versus blue, circle versus square, white versus black, silence versus shouting. These are high contrast because they are complete opposites of each other. So why is contrast pleasing? Well, it's pleasing because it's the antagonist of symmetry, of evenness. Symmetry is repetitive. Your brain is very quick to pick up patterns, so once it's locked onto one, it'll pick up a difference or break in that pattern more strongly. The stronger the break, the bigger the attention. Take this for example. These are the same shape, the same color, the same size. Your brain found the pattern immediately, so now it's boring. Once it knows where you're going, it no longer has its interest held. To keep its interest, you need to break the pattern. So what if, among all these circles, we make one black? You broke the pattern! The brain is intrigued. But even though you changed the color, it's still the same size and kind of circle. The contrast in color is noticeable, but not large. This is a little bit of lower contrast. So how do we up the contrast and make it stand out more? Let's change the size. That's way more noticeable. But let's go further. What if we change the shape too? Because of all this is probably the most amount of contrast you'll get in this piece here. It's bigger, it's a different color, and it's an entirely different shape. You might be thinking, got it, make everything high contrast and it'll be interesting. But this isn't the case. There are times to go higher contrast and times to go lower. Contrast is just a tool you need to be aware of. The further apart something is, the more interest it brings to the table, the more oomph, the more drama. You're almost smashing a pie in their face. But what if you want the effect of contrast to be more gentle? You don't want a pie in the face, you want a calmer sort of atmosphere, a little rough surface instead of massive peaks. If this is the case, you make the contrast lower. The circle being black or even slightly bigger is enough contrast to notice it. In this case, we just want to make sure your image isn't too symmetrical. We want some contrast, but not a lot. Keep big, medium, small in mind with this. Big, medium, small is essentially just a pyramid. You're going down from big shapes being the most to a little bit of medium and then a small percentage of small shapes. It breaks up evenness, which is less boring. If you want more information, I have it in this video. Now we get to this question. Why do you use contrast? Contrast is used the same way as big, medium, small is to specify where you want the focus to be. You can use it for broader things like story, to smaller things like a movement through a piece, and in general use for values. In the story sense, you can use contrast to highlight the difference between, say, a grizzled old war knight and a brand new paladin. The grungy, torn armor of the knight shows that he's been in more battles than the other, experienced harrowing moments that have changed his view on things. The paladin is newer, has yet to experience all of these. If the war knight's armor wasn't all scuffed up and worn, the theme between the two of them might not be as noticeable. They can even have contrasting opinions. Maybe the war knight believes the law is worthless and you have to take matters into your own hands with criminals. But the paladin believes rules are there for a reason and everything has to be played by the book to maintain order. These are two completely different things, and because of these contrasting opinions, there's now tension. They're so far apart, your brain is trying to solve the missing link that shows how these two will fit in the greater theme of the story. The questions of, will one change their opinion to the other, or will they fight? If they do fight, who will win? Keeps the brain entertained and interested. This is contrast in characters to explore a theme. When it comes to using contrast to move the focus throughout an image, I try to think of an image as containing an energy and you need to move it. If it's even and symmetrical, that energy won't move. So let's bring in contrast in terms of straights and curves. If you have a circle, the energy is stuck here. But if you add a straight, now the energy is moving here. Keep in mind, straight doesn't mean perfectly vertical. It just means straighter than the curve. You can also keep both the same amount of curves, but just move one lower so the energy travels down like water. The difference here isn't in the straight versus curve, but height. This is why straights versus curves is pretty good. Now we come to the main thing contrast is brought up in, and it's contrast in value. I'm sure you've seen the value scale, probably even practiced it a few times at this point. You make it by incrementally adding black to white until you have black on one side and white on the other. The furthest most values from each other, black and white, are the highest contrast you can get because they are furthest away from each other you can get. The closer you get, the less difference there is between the values and the lower the contrast is. Most of the time when beginners are shading, it might look something like this. The reason it doesn't read well is because all the values are close together and too evenly incremental down the value scale. It removes any clear delineation between light and shadow. The backgrounds are also sometimes neglected, so everything just blurs together in this undefined mush. The thing is, light actually doesn't fall off evenly. It creeps along slowly in the light group, then plummets into the darkest halftone at the edge of the terminator, which is the edge of the shadow light line here. This makes it so there's a clear shadow side and a clear light side. Instead of making the shading all in this one small group, you have a group on the light side for values of lights and a group on the dark side for values of darks for shadows. You can shrink and play around with the amount of values you put in each group, but make sure it's in two groups, light and dark. You can have two values in light, one for shadow, or you can have two for shadow and one for light, etc. Just the same as there is light and dark, there is background and foreground. It's often forgotten to make sure the value of the background isn't the same or too similar as a value from the foreground, unless you deliberately want parts of the image to fall away into the background. Remember when I mentioned different keys earlier? High, mid, and low? This is when you group values on the high, mid, or low parts of the value key for specific effects caused by higher or lower contrast. High key is when the values are predominantly coming from the high or light part of the value scale, meaning this could be your lightest and this could be your dark. There is not a lot of contrast between these two values, but if you make sure to keep your dark and lights separate, the effect is this airy, almost dreamlike feeling. It reminds me of the clouds on a nice sunny day. Mid-key is when, you guessed it, the cluster is mostly in the middle of the value scale. This is more general sort of grouping. And low key is the very bottom, very, very dark. Instead of a light, airy feel, it's a bit more suffocating by how heavy it is. It's very moody. You can use this for mysterious or even spooky artwork. Again, keep in mind to keep the values separate, even though they're in a group. If you want them to be clear, that is. I recommend this video from Marco Bucci to talk more about wiggling around on the value scale. It'll make more sense there. But you can use these keys of higher and lower contrast to separate the foreground from the background. You don't necessarily have to do one whole piece in low key, but a part of it. You can have the middle of the painting, the focus, keep in mind we need a focus, be a group in the middle scale. Then, to let the background fade off, we can keep that lower contrast. This is like high contrast middle key, while the background is low contrast in lower high key. Hopefully this video helps you explore everything else contrast could offer you. It's not just for value. Highlighting themes, moving your focus through a picture, least detail to most detail, rendering, and unmodifying colors by differentiating warm and cool. I hope this helped. I'll recommend better videos that help me with the value part to explain that better. Until then, I'll see you next time.